Welcome back into the Conference USA podcast roundtable. I'm your host for the evening, Jake Bolden, and joined with me today is going to be two of our friends here at the Conference USA podcast roundtable. Again, the Feathers and Field Goal, Dan Steenkamer, and then we have a special guest, Caleb Wynn, co-host of the Fan the Flames football podcast, our Liberty representative, to preview this matchup tomorrow afternoon there in Lynchburg, Virginia, where the Blue Hens will travel to Liberty. This one has been slated as our Conference USA Game of the Week by the Roundtable members because of all the championship game implications with this matchup. Of course, one of these members can't play in that championship game, but for whatever reason, the Blue Hens continue to find their way on this show because of the football they've been playing and because of the amount of chaos that they bring to Conference USA. So we're excited to have Delaware back on, but really, Caleb, a new face for the Fan the Flames football podcast. Last time we had Ben, but this time we're going to be previewing the Flames with you. It's been since week 2, but Caleb, first and foremost, kind of introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about your excitement for this matchup Saturday.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, Jake. I'm really excited to be here. Nice to meet you, Daniel. I have been a Liberty fan, not as long as Ben. I've went to Liberty and did not graduate, but I had a great time there. I led the Liberty Jokers, if you guys are familiar with that group. So that was really cool experience. Also ran Barstool page for Liberty as well for a little bit. So pretty involved with all sports and all aspects of Liberty. Happy to be here. Excited for this game. It's a big game for us. A lot of championship needs for this game that we need to do well. So a lot of complications that we have with how we've played in the past, and we're excited for this game. Not the best performance from us so far this year, especially with our defense and our ability to perform on offense, but excited and hopeful that we can get the win in Williams Stadium tomorrow.
Well, certainly happy to have Caleb on and give us a breakdown on the Flames matchup. But once again, a veteran of the show, it is Dan Steenkamer. Dan, once again, thanks for joining us. Coming off of a big win against the lofty Blue Raiders, that is.
Yeah, Jake, great to see you again. Thanks for the opportunity. It's I think we've been fortunate, Bryce and I, to have the chance to talk Delaware on a few occasions in a game of the week setting. Going into the year, I wasn't sure how many of these games of the week Delaware might be in line for, but as things have worked out, it's going to require Delaware playing well on Saturday or tomorrow just to earn maybe a couple more of these, if at all possible. But yeah, you're right, Jake. Delaware turning it around against Middle Tennessee to conclude Delaware's weekday schedule. I have the distinct feeling that Delaware's folks are pretty happy about, at least fans of Delaware, happy to get back on a more familiar Saturday routine through November.
I appreciate the segue because much like everyone else hopefully is on this Halloween evening is celebrating the end of Conference USA midweek. I know college football fans that just can't get enough are excited about Conference USA midweek, but for those of us that cover it, I'm thankful that it is over with because, like you said, some normalcy for once. And this is one of those games. Let's set the table once more. 2:30 Central, 3:30 Eastern. It kicks off in Lynchburg, Virginia. Currently, as we're filming this, Liberty is a 3.5-point favorite. That over-under at 51.5, a little lower than I would have anticipated. But nonetheless, we're going to be excited about this matchup. But let's go ahead and dive into it here. Let's talk with the visiting team first, Delaware. Dan, you touched on it there, getting the win against the Blue Raiders. Kind of felt like you turned some things around there on the offensive side. Still had some turnovers. I know that we really previewed in our episode of this, but nonetheless, you did enough on the offensive end to get the job done.
Well, Jake, another turnover by Delaware earlier in the game against Middle Tennessee. You mentioned this one for Delaware, a fumble coming on a botched pitch play, which in some ways is more frustrating than a forced fumble by the opposition where it's a strong hit. We saw the Jacksonville State game that Delaware lost pretty decisively. Good rallying to the football by the Gamecocks, good help defense. You don't have a defender watching as a bystander while a teammate makes a solo tackle. Got that support defense at times, an extra body popping a ball loose. To have a fumble create really plus field position for Middle Tennessee come on a botched pitch play in a Delaware offense that so often has the pre-snap motion or pre-snap misdirection or post-snap, you're out on the move with Nick Minicucci at QB, having options for a pitch at times and things like that. It's just it's a play. It's a little bit tricky, but it's still a routine type of play. I would describe it as for Delaware's offense, or a fundamental play to have early in a game or in the first half of a game. So that definitely spooked Delaware fans before we get to Halloween. But Delaware, to have the response to that adversity, to respond to being down to an underdog in the ball game, Delaware still rallying on offense and really seeing Nick Minicucci have a strong night before he was held out of the end of the game precautionarily with an upper body injury concern. Saw Nick Minicucci throw touchdown passes to Sean Wilson at receiver and to Kyrie Duplessis. Duplessis being the number one receiver on this squad statistically so far this season. So yeah, it was definitely a feeling of Delaware getting back on the right trajectory offensively in a home game, and Delaware doing enough to hold on at the end of the ball game, letting Middle Tennessee in the back door to cover at least on the road, but also Middle Tennessee making it interesting on the final score, keeping it close.
Good teams win, but great teams cover. And that's one thing my Blue Raiders haven't done until now. So I'll take it when we can. But Caleb, let's set the table here for the Flames offense. Going into this year, you know you're having the replacement at quarterback, Ethan Vasco. I'm sure you're still excited about that. Again, the last time we had a Fan the Flames podcast representative, it was that week 2 matchup against Jacksonville State. And really, when you look at the collective season, that was probably still one of your better offensive performances. But if you had told me midway through the year that Liberty would be third in Conference USA offense, I think we'd all be stunned at just under 20 points per game. Coming off of a win against New Mexico State where you put up 30 points, which is the most you guys have scored all season long, do you think that some things got figured out in that New Mexico State game, or are you still skeptical on this offense led by Ethan Vasco?
I'll be honest, Jake, very skeptical. Unfortunately, our offense has not clicked really at all this year. Thankfully, Evan Dickens has been a bright spot at running back, especially with Caden Williams going down. Really concerned about that. He's looked good for us this year. But to be honest with you, if our special teams had not shown up in the last game, we very well would have lost that game. We had 2 very luckily muff punts from New Mexico State that we ended up turning into points, and then we finally had Jay Billingsley. Finally have a kicker that can kick. That's not been a luxury we've been accustomed to in the past couple years. So really excited to see our special teams game do better, but our offense has been abysmal, Jake. I'll be honest with you. It's been tough to see. We really want to see Vasco seeing his reads. We have a lot of great weapons at receiver that we have not really gotten involved. I think of like Tyson Mobley or Elijah Canyon, both great options that have not gotten the ball as much as they should, as well as Reese Smith, who's a great slot guy, transferred from West Virginia a couple of years ago, had some injuries, but he should be a great option for Vasco. And unfortunately, we just have not seen Vasco do well against the pressure and not making great reads, and then also having some overthrown balls that should have been easy touchdowns or easy catches, easy throws to make. So unfortunately, I'm not very confident about this game. This should be a game that should be a barn burner, in my opinion, with the offenses that both teams should have. And that would have been my opinion coming into this game at the beginning of the year. And I was speaking to Jake before the episode. This is a game that I would have expected to be a quote unquote trap game for the Flames because of the success of Delaware. I was really, really excited when Delaware was announced as a member of Conference USA, because I think they're going to be a great addition, and they already are. And I'm excited to see this matchup. But I'm concerned with the ball play from Nick Minicucci, and he's been playing really well. And I don't know that we can stand an air raid offense like Delaware with the way our secondary has been struggling through injuries. Now our secondary's played very well with the injuries that we do have, but Brylan Green, a guy that has been all conference and second team all nation. So in the past has really, really struggled with this injury against ODU, got hit in the back. I was there for that game. And it's not looking good when you have a guy like that, a ball hawking safety that is not going to be able to do what he is in ball hawking. He was wearing a club earlier this year and then is now going to be sidelined. So I think there's a great opportunity for Delaware to really run all over the field with us. And I mean, they're having the best offense in the conference so far. So I'm really not confident on our offense or our defense, but if we can get some stops and then establish the run game through Dickens, I think we might have a good opportunity in this game.
Amongst many of the storylines really on Delaware's side, and of course I'm close to those storylines. Obviously, again, the amount of time you guys have been on here, and then last week Delaware facing MTSU. So, but one of the things I just really want to dive into, because Caleb kind of mentioned it there, Dan, I know that Delaware is not in the hunt for Conference USA because of their transition season, but hearing those words from someone that would be considered the stalwart of Conference USA. They were a shoe-in preseason favorite, and they've kind of fallen from grace, if you will. But there's still plenty of time, I'm sure, as Caleb has kind of alluded to, that this team has plenty of opportunity. But in hearing that this might be an opportunity where Delaware can really sneak up on the preseason favorite, do you feel that kind of vibe there in Newark, that this is an opportunity that they could really seize?
Yeah, I look at it as a major game for Delaware. Delaware starting off what's going to be a really challenging stretch of November games. Looking at that first November in the FBS, where you're guaranteed to have that regular season game in Thanksgiving week. Delaware is used to that end of November being an FCS playoff first round week when Delaware is qualified for the playoffs and play in the opening round and not had a bye, which has been the case last couple of times in the postseason. But no, I think because of that. And just having that context in mind, this November 1st game happening tomorrow really just is that opening game of this heck of a run that we've looked at Feathers and Field Goals. I think we've discussed it a couple of times as it's really one of those games where Delaware figured going into the year, you're looking at it from afar saying, oh yeah, probably giving an underdog on the road at Liberty. Didn't know where Liberty would necessarily be in the league standings to this point. Liberty's had a tough schedule. You look at Liberty's resume, and I was mentioning it on our episode that's dropped here this week, previewing this game tomorrow. Liberty's resume has a bunch of games against really tough opponents. I mean, in non-conference, having to play James Madison and Old Dominion, well, two of the better teams in the Sun Belt, certainly two of the best teams in the Sun Belt East. I wouldn't be surprised at all if JMU's in the Sun Belt title game. And then Liberty's already played Jacksonville State, and Delaware knows what that's like too. So I don't think Delaware is going to take Liberty's record to mean, oh, Liberty has fallen from necessarily it's forgotten how to be the lead dog in CUSA. I don't think Delaware will treat it that way. But the opportunity, to answer your question, Jake, the opportunity really does feel like it's there. So long as Delaware can have Nick Minicucci at the start at quarterback. It didn't sound like it was too much beyond a precaution to have Minicucci exit the game against Middle Tennessee, like I mentioned. But that is something that's kind of hanging over things in the course of this week. So that's something that will, I think, be on the minds all the way up to Saturday. If there's not a lot of information that comes out, which typically there isn't on any banged up players or even like slightly injured players from what we can tell, there isn't usually a lot that gets out on Delaware injuries over the course of the week. So that does kind of cloud things a little bit. But I think in general, as a general matter, Delaware knows well and good. I mean, you're looking at a Liberty program that ascended to the FBS, had to do it, the hard way, and initially FBS independence. Took a lot to get that achieved for sure. And then to find Liberty's way into a league and be in a New Year's Six Bowl and have that success at the highest levels of the FBS, really, when you're in a New Year's Six Bowl. I mean, goodness, it didn't take very long. So Delaware recognizes regionally what a huge moment this is to have a game on the road that's drivable for fans. Kind of has that old CAA football feel. Not that Liberty was a member of CAA football, but just having that drivable distance for a road game. You can make it a long day trip if you've got it in you. So I think Delaware's got to be pretty excited about that, to have this is a big game for just this regional recruiting territory, looking at two CUSA programs kind of occupying that same area surrounding the DMV. So I'm not going to claim Delaware is in the DMV. We know Delaware is the Delaware D, and then there's the DCD in DMV. But it's still, despite splitting hairs over that, it's still a big moment, I think, for sure, to have kind of a regional rivalry possibly budding with this being the first league matchup between the two.
Well, Liberty does enter this contest, all things considered, with a 2-game winning streak. They are 2-1 in Conference USA, and that one loss is to Jacksonville State. Past this game against Delaware, I would say Missouri State, depending on the health of Jacob Clark, as we've seen this last week, he's the only one that can resurrect that offense. FIU, what team are you going to get with Coach Simmons? Louisiana Tech, if Sonny Cumbie has already used up his 4 wins this year, you could probably chalk that up as a win, so that's probably good for Liberty. But then that final game at home against Kennesaw State is one that I know it's way in the future. I know it's a month now until that game happens, but if you're Liberty, that's a game that is potentially a playoff game, but none of that means anything, in my opinion. And Caleb, correct me if I'm wrong, if you don't win tomorrow. Because if you enter the Missouri State FIU games with 2 losses, I think even if you get through that undefeated and playing Kennesaw State at 5-2, if you will, I don't know that Liberty's in because of that Jack State tiebreaker that's going to come into play at the end of the year. And of course, maybe Kennesaw State, if they can pick up a loss somewhere, then maybe you are playing for that final spot that last week. But again, all of that means nothing if you can't win tomorrow. I mean, does it feel like this could potentially be a very, very early playoff game for you guys in terms of Conference USA Championship?
100%. This is probably the most important game as far as conference that we've had so far, other than maybe the Jacksonville State game. But definitely with our schedule, man, yeah, if we don't win tomorrow, our optimism definitely dwindles. It's unfortunate that it has to come to this. This is not something that we would have wanted to had to have happened. We thought we could, maybe afford a trap game, like I mentioned before, with the Delaware and coming into Williams Stadium and winning. It's definitely not going to be easy to beat Kennesaw State. Then, like you mentioned, on the 29th at home, especially during Thanksgiving, because that's your students are going to be home. We have a lot of Liberty students that come across all the country. Those games typically have been low attendance games for us, and I think that's the case across multiple schools as well. But you really lose that home field advantage, which I'll be honest, probably played a big role into this last win against New Mexico State. I made a tweet regarding the fumble, the muff punt by New Mexico State, the first one. We were right there on the sidelines. I have tickets on the 30-yard line, and I saw the punt coming in, and the return man, was nowhere near the ball. It was close enough, but nowhere near the ball to where he was going to get hit. And then the whole crowd started getting excited and involved. And I legitimately think it psyched the return man into thinking that he had fumbled. So then he went and tried to recover, muffed that, and then we recovered and then ended up winning the game. So you're losing that home field advantage by having a game that's not going to be well attended later. So it definitely raises the stakes for a game against Delaware, which a team that you need to beat, a team that is going to be difficult to beat. I know you mentioned that it's a lower over under line, and I agree. I think that's very low. I could see it being a very high scoring game, and depending upon the mistakes that Liberty makes, which, like I mentioned before to you, Jake, unfortunately, we've had a lot of undisciplined errors this year. We averaged 1 or 2 personal fouls. So, I mean, a lot of just really undisciplined stuff that you need to clean up. We have a lot of penalties. We're heavily penalized, and we're throwing interceptions. We're having turnovers. And, I mean, even last game, Ethan Vasco threw 2 picks, both of which were awful. I mean, just missing his reads. I'm not sure really what the problem was, but we're giving teams opportunities, and if we had not had special teams in the last one, we wouldn't have won, and we wouldn't even be talking about this game being so important. So this is a game that we need to win. I'm excited, but very, very nervous. And you're right. It is probably the most important game for us that we had in a while, even more so than New Mexico State, because if we don't win, then there goes all of our hope.
We've talked offense, we've talked some storylines, but next we're going to be talking about defense, what needs to happen for both of these programs to win tomorrow, and of course, some score predictions from your CUSA podcast roundtable members. But before we do that, we have to thank our sponsor for today's episode. Conseco Group has been transforming visions into reality since 1987. Known for making the impossible possible, they specialize in pre-construction consulting, construction management, design build, and renovations. With a hands-on, client-focused approach, Conseco Group consistently delivers high-quality results while maximizing investment. Based in Nashville and trusted across Middle Tennessee, their reach spans the entire Southeast. Conseco Group, building excellence one project at a time. Learn more at consecogroup.com or call 615-298-9907. Thanks again to the Conseco Group for sponsoring today's episode. We are joined here with members of Conference USA Roundtable. Dan Steenkamer of the Feathers and Field Goal, our Delaware representative, and Caleb Wynn, our representative for Fan the Flames podcast, our Liberty team. Previewing this matchup again Saturday at 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central Time. The Blue Hens travel to Liberty in Lynchburg, Virginia. The other side of this is that Liberty has had a very good defense this year, top 3 in the conference in regards to points allowed. And then Delaware has been on the opposite end of that. They're in the bottom half of the conference in terms of points allowed. So I look at this matchup and I have to think something's got to give. And I know prior to the commercial break there, Caleb talked about the total being a little low, but I have to think it like something's given here. Either both of these, one team's going to figure out their offense or the other team's going to have to figure out their defense. And we're going to get both ends of that spectrum. I think 51.5 is probably Vegas trying to throw a dart somewhere in there, but I have to think that something's going to give here. But Dan, I guess the scary thought for Delaware is that if Liberty plays the defense that they're capable of, this could certainly be a rock fight that I don't think Delaware is interested in playing.
I'm with you, Jake. This is one of those where Delaware is arguably most comfortable when it surpasses 30 points in a game scored on offense. And that's not because Delaware's defense does nothing but let up points in shootouts, but more so because if Delaware is scoring more than 30 points in a game, it's just the overall game flow is in Delaware's favor. Momentum's in Delaware's favor. Delaware's offense, inherently is clicking when it's surpassing 30 points. Delaware is maybe taking a longer drive or two down the field, helping out his defense. I really look at Delaware's defensive points allowed outcomes as like reflective of Delaware's overall team and not strictly just the defensive side of the ball. Now, over the course of episodes over at Feathers and Field Goals, it might sound like I've been making excuses or trying to explain away certain stats, but I look at things like the example of the Middle Tennessee game that Delaware did win. But on a couple occasions there, we talked about the Delaware fumble on the fumbled away pitch by Delaware offense. That sets up a shorter field and MTSU's touchdown or one of those touchdowns. Then you have Middle Tennessee, and this is all credit to the Blue Raiders executing a late drive in the ball game to make it a one-score game, make it that 3-point final. That drive set up by a Delaware interception that was thrown by Braden Streeter, the quarterback who came in relief of Nick Minicucci. So it's one of those where those were a couple possessions that it's arguable Middle Tennessee, like it wasn't as if Delaware's defense was the reason that Middle Tennessee even had those prime scoring chances to begin with. Delaware was kind of late in the game against Middle, seemingly happy to have that clock drain a little bit there and make Middle Tennessee go the length of the field. But then again, it's still a valid point that at some point Delaware's defense could use a couple more takeaways at times, could bow up a couple more times, later in games like against Middle Tennessee to get that points per game average lower. Because it seems like Liberty, for instance, is an offense that has that untapped, awakening coming down the pipe somewhere along the line. It seems like, and I use this phrase for Western Kentucky in a game of the week that Delaware had to begin weekday CUSA. It's just a Liberty team that I think, again, I'm not the expert that Caleb would be and coming in from afar here, but looking at the results and so far getting a feel for things this week, it feels like Liberty has more in the tank, right? Like there's more to come in the tank for Liberty, and Delaware is at risk of finding that out. On the road at what I would think will be a great crowd for a return to a Saturday game. You think it'll be a great turnout. That student turnout, I get the feel is going to be strong like usual. So Delaware would definitely like to see, his defense put together a complete day as much as possible, led by defensive coordinator Manny Rojas, who actually went to Liberty. A homecoming week for Manny Rojas, a Liberty guy starting out his career in college football as a player. So this is one where Coach Rojas' return to Lynchburg is a storyline this week for sure in Delaware circles. And I would think it'll be a bit of an emotional day for Coach Rojas. He's one of the longest tenured Delaware staff members, and he hasn't had the chance to go head-to-head with Liberty. It's a Delaware and Liberty pair of programs that has another overlap with Danny Rocco historically being a head coach for both teams in their FCS era. So it's just kind of interesting, the fact that Delaware now, like I said earlier, gets a chance to play another more regional type of opponent for the first time in the league schedule, and really in some ways the only time, depending on how you define Delaware's region. So this is one where Delaware's defense with Rojas making his homecoming on, I think, Liberty's official homecoming, unless I'm mistaken. Caleb could correct me, but just fun to have that combination of factors going on externally. But then the reality is, Delaware's defense would really like to help Delaware's offense find its way. Delaware's had a successful year offensively, but there have been times where Delaware's defense has been asked for a lot. It has been asked for a lot on short fields and has been asked to spend a little more time on the field at times, with UD playing that 3-3-5 defense and rotating in as many D linemen to stay fresh as they can.
I saw the stat flash when Delaware was playing MTSU. Coach Carty is undefeated in games where they score 30 points, which I thought was one. I mean, that's not necessarily a ridiculously high score. You see stats like where it's 40 plus. You're like, well, obviously, but 30, I mean, that's a 4 touchdown game. And again, nuance does matter, like you said, to what touchdowns are allowed. And I look back to that Streeter interception, and I was like, I can't believe they threw the football. All you had to do was get a first down, and they, just stupid stuff kind of sets your defense up in those bad situations. But one thing is for sure, though, this Liberty defense is a force to be reckoned with. They're still one of the better ones in the conference. Even in yards allowed, they're one of the best in this conference. Caleb, I have to think that if Liberty is going to win this game, that Starwalt defense has got to show up. And I think, again, even if the offense is good or bad, if that defense shows up, you got to feel like this is one you can take over pretty easily.
It's definitely a storyline to mention for sure. Coach Krantz's defense has been inconsistent this year when it comes to the run defense specifically. We've allowed a lot of big gains, especially on 3rd and long, and then even 4th and short. We tend to do well on 3rd and short for some reason, and it's interesting that we team to do well and better on third and shorter yardage than we have in longer yardage. But I know that Delaware is a force to reckon with on their offense when it comes to going for it on 4th down. The highest percentage in CUSA for going for it on 4th down, and we actually tend to do pretty well when it's in 4th and long. But again, it'll be interesting to see that. Now, our defense, our secondary has been great. We've been able to restrict teams to passing. But again, with a team like Delaware and an air raid offense, I'm intrigued to see how that's going to go. So I agree with you, Jake, in the sense that something's going to have to give. Either we're going to be able to stop the run defense and Delaware is going to have to rely on their air raid offense, which I think is probably a very likely outcome. And then we'll just kind of see who wins in the trenches as far as whether we can get to the quarterback. I think we need to expect some sacks from Liberty this week. I think that's something that we've really been stressing from some of our edge rushing. We haven't sent as much pressure this year as I would have liked for us to. And until recently, we did last week, and I think it worked very well for us, especially towards the end of the game. You had 2 turnovers you got due to that pressure from the inside and outside, even from Damon Harmon coming from the outside, being that guy that can play great corner in coverage, but also apply pressure to the quarterback, and has been able to get a couple sacks this year. So really want to see whether it's strip fumbles or interceptions. Turnovers are going to be a great storyline for this game. We tend to win when we have turnovers. We have our Joker mask celebration that has been famous throughout Conference USA. It's fun to celebrate with, and the guys want to do it, and they enjoy turnovers, but we need turnovers to win this game, and we have to stop those big runs. We're not usually a team that gives up a lot of short yardage gains. It's usually, we do really, really well, and then we have the slip ups, the mistakes where we give up a big run, an 80-yard run, or we get beat over because we had a corner get beat, or we have a bad penalty that we take, and then we ended up getting scored on. So I think we clean up some of the nitty gritty. We clean up some of the mistakes that we've seen through this Flames this year, and we stop the run, make Nick Minucci throw the ball. And if we can compete in our secondary, I think this is going to be a great game. And that line may be more accurate. I know you said it like throwing a dart, may not know. It's a very intriguing game. And you were right, Dan, it is our homecoming, and a good homecoming there for the fans. So I expect a great turnout. I know a lot of times with homecoming games, teams will historically schedule the teams that they think they're going to beat on their schedules. However, this is not one that I necessarily am very confident in. And so but as a fan of the game and as a fan of Conference USA, I'm very excited for, because I think it's going to be a great turnout and a great game. I hope the fans stay, even though it's going to be a little colder in Lynchburg on this weekend or tomorrow.
Well, I'm certainly excited about this game, not just because it's my game of the week pick, but because you guys are here joining with me to preview it. And so now this is where the fans want to know. And of course, this is where all of the Vegas people are going to tune in, because we've got the best insight on what's going to happen on this game. I'm going to turn it over to the visiting team first. Again, let's set this 3.5 point line. Liberty is favored at home, over under at 51.5. Dan, first, how do you see this game playing out? Do you have a score prediction for us? And then lastly, I want you to wrap this up. What can we expect from Feathers and Field Goal this week leading up to kickoff? Give us some of your recording schedule. And two, I know Bryce is super stoked about basketball season. Got anything coming up with basketball starting next week?
Thanks so much, Jake. And yeah, this time has flown by. It's crazy to think we're already closing this one out. I guess I could yap way longer. So it's lucky that we are wrapping up for all those watching or listening. But for as far as the game goes tomorrow on the football field, Delaware at Liberty, I'm very interested in how Liberty opens up the ball game, looking at a Flame squad that's had time off, looking at coming off a bye, but then also the last time Liberty played, prior to that bye, you're looking at a weekday CUSA game that helps make this one, even longer of a layoff. So that can be very helpful for a team. I'm thinking about Liberty getting the chance to watch Delaware live a couple times. My math should be right on that Delaware played twice live, with Liberty having a chance to watch live, with Liberty being idle. So that to me, it can be very helpful in the planning. And Delaware does some quirky stuff, some creative stuff on offense, likes to flash a ton of looks. Head coach Ryan Carty is the offensive play caller, and he's pretty clever. And there are times where, and Jake kind of mentioned this, it's arguable that he gets a little, clever, extra clever, and it could be to detriment. But he goes against the grain for sure. And I think that's by his own admission, if I'm remembering a post-game quote correctly. So anyhow, just looking at, how these teams for Liberty and Delaware match up early in the game, that early game script, or if some call it like the scripted plays, a scripted drive to start out. And how does Liberty look on offense in terms of having that crisp start out of the gate? Because I could see if Liberty has a strong opening drive, really moves the football, even if you wind up having to settle for 3, let alone punching it in the end zone would be huge, needless to say. That kind of thing would really, I'm sure, spark, no pun intended, but really spark that homecoming crowd and make Delaware feel it on the road. Delaware's road win at FIU this year was not nearly the same atmosphere as we'll get at Liberty on Saturday or tomorrow. So I'm focused on the early part of the game as far as what I'm expecting. And then for Delaware's expectations, on defense, not sure if you'll see Dylan Traynor at linebacker. He's had to miss time. He's a centerpiece of the defense at linebacker in the middle. And Gavin Mole and Merge Malumba, Blake Matthews have looked really good at linebacker, but just not exactly sure what Dylan Traynor's status will be if he can get added back to that linebacker group and be part of this Delaware defense that will have to account for Dickens at tailback, which will be a big story. You're looking at a top 5 rusher on Liberty's end going against the Delaware offense that Delaware really hasn't sprung its running backs lately, for big gains. Joe Silver, Byron Ellison, they've been involved in getting snaps and touches and part of the offense, but it hasn't been as prolific for Delaware on the ground. With the running back game, QB run game is still a possibility with Nick Minicucci if he's able to go tomorrow. But I would say that all leads up to my game pick. I'm going to go with Liberty at home. I'm picking against Delaware. I remember picking against Delaware and not being too happy to do so, but picking against Delaware, if I recall correctly, for the WKU week game of the week that Delaware had. And I just look at it as kind of a similar scenario where give a lot of credit and respect to this established program in CUSA. Delaware in November road games against these types of quality programs, it hasn't come easily. I think dating back to Delaware's FCS days, it's been it gets to be a grind. You hit November and you go to these types of venues, and Delaware is learning that, or is going to learn, I think, that it's just it feels like that much longer a season when you're not turning around and there's a kind of a break in the schedule, or there's a little bit of a lapse in the strength of schedule, in the CAA slate. This isn't the case against Liberty. Liberty is going to come out looking at this playoff game was mentioned as type of a path to the conference title game. I definitely get the sense Liberty will play that way, and I think it's tough because Delaware didn't close out the end of the Middle Tennessee game in such a way that necessarily felt like Delaware's played its most complete game yet. And I just don't look at a road game as the spot where I'm going to predict that Delaware is going to play its most complete game. I think that's what will be necessary for Delaware. Liberty has that untapped potential that hasn't quite all clicked yet on offense. I got Liberty 35-28 over Delaware. I do see one score game here, but Delaware's margin for error is pretty thin. You look at moments where Delaware was helped out by Middle Tennessee, a penalty or two extending things for Delaware or setting Middle Tennessee back, as the case may be. I don't really look at Liberty as being the squad that's going to commit those, although the numbers, I think Caleb mentioned, there have been some more penalties, and Delaware hasn't been frequently penalized overall. What was the last time Delaware was held up by flags a lot? Well, it was on the road at Jacksonville State. This game at Liberty reminds me of that. I'm not quite going to go as strongly as picking Delaware, so I've got the Flames here.
And give us your release schedule this week as far as previewing the game.
My bad. Yeah, already taking the extra time to let all that air out of my gums. I didn't even mention. Yes, Feathers and Field Goals podcast. Big week for us. Really excited to have the basketball season preview, both men's and women's basketball. That's out here this week. That's been published this week. Podcast, the audio, where you get your audio, Spotify, Apple Podcast, our YouTube channel, having interviews with both Martin Inglesby, Sarah Jenkins, men's and women's basketball head coaches, respectively, a player from both teams. So that's really a fun way to kind of turn things into this coming week when both teams, of course, start their season. And I know Liberty being in the same boat, it's all nationally getting going on Monday. So that's such a thrill. And that's kind of the very latest we have going on over our way. So thanks for reminding me, Jake. Sorry about that.
Excellent stuff from Dan. And of course, Bryce Leslie, who's not joining us tonight at the Feather and Field Goals podcast. Great stuff from you guys as always. Caleb, I'm going to throw it over to you again to wrap this one up. Tell me how you think this game is going to roll out in Lynchburg. And then lastly, that release schedule for you guys at Fan the Flames this week.
Yeah, thank you so much again for having us on, Jake. I'm really excited to represent Liberty and the Fan of the Flames football/basketball podcast. I do host the basketball rendition of our podcast, and we will be out this week. We record and should be out every Tuesday, Wednesdays throughout the season. We have some players on, and I really enjoy getting able to deep dive into our basketball season. But when it comes to football, same thing with Fan of the Flames, release every week. We try to, at least. Ben's been on a little bit of a break recently, got a lot of work going on, but Jeremiah Flincham and I have been able to record for him. So we have some stuff coming out soon previewing this game. So we're excited about that. As far as the game is concerned, I think it's going to be even closer than Dan had said. So I've got 30-27 Liberty, which I know the Vegas might love that I'm dancing right around that line. So happy to see that. I think it's gonna be a close game. I think the Flames come out hot, no pun intended again, but excited for this game. I think we tend to play better in the fourth quarter if we can survive that long. So as long as our defense performs early in the game, then we are able to punch the ball into the end zone and not settle for field goals like we have earlier in the season. I think we're going to be able to come up to a bit of a lead and hopefully maintain that throughout the game. But I do believe it's going to be close. You could see it very back and forth. If we can minimize our undisciplined mistakes, those penalties, giving up big plays on third and fourth and long, I think we see the Flames win, but I believe it's going to be close. And special teams and turnovers is going to be a story for this. So excited for this game, excited for the opportunity to be playing for a championship. I think Liberty is going to go out here and win this game because they need to, which is not something that they've had this year, except for maybe against New Mexico State. They have more drive. It's a life or death situation for these Flames, and I hope that they step up to the task, and I believe that they will, but I don't believe it's going to be a blowout. I think it's going to be a very close game, but we want to see some confidence and some fire lit amongst the Flames and be able to win this game and hopefully finish the season strong and make a good resume for that conference championship.
Typically, whenever I do this, I'm always the tiebreaker. So it's interesting to see for once I'm not the tiebreaker amongst the picks of our guests today, both going with Liberty. So I'll save the big climax buildup that I was going to have for this game. But when I look at this on paper, one team seems to be trending and the other one seems to be surviving. And I think Delaware is the team that's trending. All things considered, the scores don't look that way when you look at Jack State, but then you look at what they did against MTSU. You look at what they did against FIU. You even look at what they did against Western Kentucky. I think they have a resume of good football. But as Dan already said, the thing that kills this team more than anything is themselves. It's the bad turnovers. It's the untimely turnovers that just put them in these compromised positions on defense that I don't think we've allowed the defense for the Blue Hens to really shine this year. We all love Minicucci. He's been the surprise of Conference USA. I think he's going to get plucked from Delaware this year. And God help us all that are CUSA fans that he does leave, because as a Blue Raider fan, if we have to face Delaware here, I hope we don't have Minicucci in the blue and gold, or maybe the black and white if they bring that back. I don't know. It worked out. You got to win. That storyline is over with. So that's good news for Delaware. On the other side, Liberty, the one story that I can't keep my eyes off of is that second half offense just goes to sleep until it has to come alive. We saw with Maine. I mean, they blew up for 3 touchdowns against Maine. Even against Jacksonville State, you put yourself back in that ball game with the late comeback. New Mexico State, you guys were dead in the water. Drove all the way down the field, won the football game. So the thing about Liberty that is so intriguing to me is, all things considered, and Dan, don't let me put you to sleep here, because this is going to be the same story I said against Western Kentucky. I can't pick against one of the programs that have just been stellar in this conference. I can't pick against Jamie Chadwell in games like this. And Delaware and Coach Carty, all things considered, still getting their feet underneath them, because they make these silly mistakes that take them out of these ball games. And hopefully, I hope that it's a good football game. And I think because Liberty is still finding their offense, their defense is still good enough that it's going to keep them in every ball game that they play in Conference USA. I think Delaware is good enough on offense for those same reasons, going to keep them in every single ball game that they play, but it's who makes the most mistakes. And unfortunately, I think Delaware finds themselves on the bad end of a lot of those, and I just have to pick with Coach Chadwell. Until Liberty has really been dethroned, and New Mexico State would have been the dethroning. Losing to Tony Sanchez, a coach that's on the hot seat, would have been a really bad loss early in the year. So I think if that game ended differently, I would have a different opinion. But I've seen 3 different times this year where that Liberty offense just comes alive when they have to. And being at home, homecoming weekend, I just think I have to go with Liberty. And the roundtable, I know we posted the graphic by the time that this comes out. The roundtable is pretty split on this, and I think for good reasons. But I like this one in a rock fight. Like I said, I think Liberty's defense will keep this one close. Of course, that the health status of Minicucci does obviously put that up in the air as well. But I think from what I've understood, as Dan explained it too, things seem to be precautionary. He's going to be fine. But I like this one, a low-scoring affair. I actually like Liberty 21-17, very low scoring as Vegas would have it look, even though I said that the line was low. But I could easily see this game getting blown up. I think if Delaware puts this one up in the scoring early, Liberty will get into that desperation offense that we've seen, and this game shoots up into the 60s. I wouldn't be stunned to see that game either. But I think if both teams are playing at their best, it's going to be Liberty's defense is going to take the reins on this one, and that desperation offense will continue. But again, Delaware finds themselves in these games, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited to have Dan and of course, newcomer Caleb. Look forward to seeing all your stuff with basketball season. And as this season dwindles down, we'll have you guys back on, I'm sure, as both of these teams continue to play good football. Thanks to you, the listener, for joining us this evening. I'm excited for that 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 kickoff in Lynchburg, Virginia. Thanks to the Conseco Group for sponsoring today's episode. And until next time, we will catch you at our next week's Game of the Week.